What is a good weakness to mention on a job interview? If you are changing industries, your biggest weakness is not knowing the industry yet. If you are younger, say inexperience, anything to show your willingness to learn and develop. Depends on the position, but I will sometimes say that I have trouble delegating when I know I can perform a task well. I'd rather just do it myself and know that everything will be done correctly. Edit. Thank you for the various precious metals. I realize this advice can backfire. That's why I said sometimes. There is also a way to phrase this that makes you sound better. I interviewed a girl once and she said honestly, cake, I can never say no to it. She was so genuine and the answer struck us all as honestly hilarious. We hate those corporate interview questions too. It was more about finding someone who could answer questions like a real person and had some sort of personality show through. It's amazing how many people just couldn't answer certain questions, as though they were so nervous to get it wrong they froze up. In another interview, my boss asked a candidate, tell me about a time you screwed up at work. She thought for a while and said, gosh, I'm sorry. There are certainly times, but there's nothing major that comes to mind at the moment. I'll think on it while we do other questions. That's what we wanted as interviewers, not a perfect answer, just people that seemed comfortable and normal. Lol. Being vague. Can you elaborate? Yeah. Edit. Wow. Was having a not so cool day but got here to see I got my first gold. Thanks. Stranger. Comma now to figure out what it does. I was asked this during an interview with Uber and I was completely caught off guard, so I ended up fumbling and saying something along the lines of I cannot ride a unicycle, for which I immediately regretted. I once got a job partly because of my honest answer to this. I need to know why I am doing what I'm doing. I don't like being told to do something without an end game in mind, without knowing the reasoning behind it. When I work, I need something to aim at. Some employers don't like this because they like their employees to be cogs in a machine they control. I don't like those jobs and I don't want them. The place I was applying to was not that kind of workplace, and they liked my answer. Ended up being a great job where my boss valued my input and trusted me to take the reins on a variety of tasks. Edit. Oh, whoa. Thanks for the gold and silver. RIP my inbox. When I was graduating college, I got interview tips from my dad, who was heavily involved in the hiring process at his company for his department. His advice on this one, which I've used ever since and has gone great, was, the wholesale weakness that's actually a positive has been done to death and is such common knowledge that it's no longer a clever trick and is now seen as avoiding the question. People want to see some self-awareness. Obviously don't bring something absolutely terrible up, but mention a real flaw and most importantly what you've done to address or work with it. For example, the one I tend to use is that I can be forgetful, so I now keep multiple sets of calendars, reminders, notes, etc. to cover as much as possible. Honesty. I don't think honesty is a weakness. I don't give a duck what you think. For my current job, I said that I had a hard time sharing my ideas with new groups. I'm terrible at interviews. Weak against fire and sharp objects. My biggest weakness is that sometimes in interviews, I have absolutely no idea how to answer some of the questions. Edit. Thanks for popping my gold cherry, stranger. Why do you want to work here? I'd say my greatest weakness is listening. I work in healthcare and always say not speaking Spanish, and odds are the interviewer is also not fluent in Spanish, so it comes across as not really a weakness. Win-win. What is your greatest weakness? Probably that I have no strengths. I printed out a card that says sometimes I over-prepare and handed it to them when they asked it. I got the job. Terrible handwriting is my biggest weakness. How so? You'll never know what I wrote down. It looks like a blind man wrote. Edit. And thank you everyone who wished me a happy cake day. I keep replying and whatnot, but I'm about to go to work, so here is one big thank you. Also thanks for making it feel like I'm not alone on the bad handwriting thing. I've always been embarrassed about it, but I appreciate you all with horrid handwriting. I don't feel so alone. Actual weakness. Taking on jobs by myself. Not taking time to train other people to do them. In the end, I'm usually the guy and find myself feeling burned out. Probably could be worded better at an interview. But this could sound like you're a go-getter. It might also encourage your employer to find opportunities for you to train other people to do things you particularly don't like doing. Frame it in terms of something you're looking to improve. Well, at my last performance evaluation I received some constructive criticism regarding X. So since then I've been doing Y and Z to focus on improving in that regard. Honestly though, if an interviewer asks you that ridiculous cliched question, either they have no idea what they're doing and or don't give a shit, or they aren't looking for an answer but just want to see how you respond to being pushed. I have a hard time saying no. Recruiter here, just be completely honest. The hiring manager is looking for an honest answer because those who can't identify their areas of weakness aren't working on them. Edit. Getting lots of feedback here. The weakness question is being asked in a workplace, and so your answer should pertain to the workplace, not your personal life. Saying well I just can't resist brownies. That's not an answer as it pertains to the workplace. The interviewer is both assessing your ability to reflect on personal development as well as your self-awareness within the workplace. They want to know if after they hire you, you have the social maturity to keep work at work and home at home. They're also trying to gauge whether or not you're going to be a future pain in their ass. So yes, give an honest answer, but still an answer as it relates to your profession. If you need an office reference, think how would Jim answer this question? Not how would Dwight answer this question? Here's a good example. Sometimes I get distracted at work, so I've recently started using an app to regulate my screen time. It's honest. It's related to the workplace. It's short and concise. It's a real issue. It shows that you're working on your issues. It also shows that you're a chill ass dude because you didn't start talking about how you care too much or some fake bullet. See what I mean? As someone who interviews hundreds of people each year, this question stumps almost every person asked. The worst responses are, I have trouble being on time. I'm argumentative. I don't get along with. I also don't think disguising strengths as weaknesses is a good idea either. The best response I think I have heard, besides not being able to ride a unicycle, is, I make mistakes, but I am only human. I am sure I will make some mistakes along the way learning the ins and outs of this position. But as soon as I know I made a mistake, I try to fix it immediately and make sure it doesn't happen again. Just my 2 cents. My weakness is I can get too focused on a task trying to perfect it, and waste time trying to get a 96 to a 97 when 90 is acceptable. On the blueprints we get they say there is a plus minus tolerance of 3mm for my measurements. That is way too huge, and I insist on trying to get it down to at least 1mm. In my most recent interview, got the job, I answered I don't like to stay late. I'll come in half an hour early at the drop of a hat. But if you tell me I'm off at 4 and then work conspires to try to keep me longer, I will not be staying. Work stops at 4. Period. Depending on the job and culture, this can break your chances of getting the job. But pretty much anyone can sympathize with not wanting to stay later. And it doesn't come off as one of those smartass I'm a perfectionist answers. It also tells them that you probably won't be racking up that expensive overtime. Figure out a skill that's not required for the job you are applying for, but is required for the job 2 promotions above that job. Then say it's your big weakness but that also you are looking to learn and develop that skill from people who are strong at it. Alternatively, if you're far enough along in your career that you have had several promotions and have reports people to delegate to, you can say you were never as good as other people at skill someone below your job level must do, but that's why you've learned to delegate it. I always say that my biggest weaknesses are the ones I don't know about yet, because the ones I do know about I can, and do, work to improve on. And then I segue into a conversation about how I take criticism very well and am always open to suggestions for ways in which I can improve my performance. My big D is always getting caught on things and knocking things. One of my actual weaknesses, when I get nervous excited, I tend to speak really fast and breathlessly. This can actually have a negative influence on my job as I work in healthcare and have to communicate during emergencies. For my next interview, I will bring this up and say I have discovered that taking a second to collect myself and take a deep breath seems to calm my nerves and allow me to say what is needed in a more collected manner. I work too hard. I care too much. And sometimes I can be too invested in my job. Random off topic. But I once had an interviewer ask me if you were an item on the salad bar, what would you be and why? Which I replied shredded cheese. Because I'm full fat and straight off the block. They absolutely loved the answer and thought I was a quick thinker. But alas, I'm just frequently thinking about cheese. Am I the only one who thinks this is an unreasonable, unfair, asshole question to ask in a job interview? You're supposed to sell yourself and put your best foot forward, often for the first impression, and someone is asking you to criticize yourself in some meaningful way where you balance on a knife edge between spoiling your chances and wow, what a cop out, they must be dishonest. God forbid I actually name a character flaw I have and they ask how I mitigate it. It wouldn't be a character flaw I still have if I hadn't already fully figured that out. So thanks, asshole. I hate this interview question. I interview candidates every few months. This is a totally useless question. The field I interview for usually has passionate people. So instead I ask, of all the aspects of doing job, which part of the process do you enjoy the most? Nobody is nervous about this question. Gives me some insight into what they want to be working on, where they think they are strongest, and what would make them happy and productive versus bored. I work too hard and need very little compensation. An actual weakness you do have. And stop with the I'm perfectionists. I'm too helpful and all that jazz. No one believe it anymore. You're not fooling anyone. And some might think you're taking them for stupid people. Not a great thing to convey. Also, usually, you have 2 weeks or so of probation period. They will see your actual weaknesses during that time. If you weren't honest during your interview, that won't help building trust between you and management. Not a good thing. So talk about an actual weakness you have, and what you're doing to improve on it. And it has to be something related to the job you're seeking. My greatest weakness is the inability to answer this question. As a professional recruiter, I rarely ask this question. But if I do, I'll get annoyed by canned answers like I'm a perfectionist or workaholic. Why? Because it's a self-serving stock answer that leads me to distrust the rest of the answers I'm getting. I'd rather hear something genuine that actually tells me something about that person. Something like, my workspace tends to get messy so I really have to focus on keeping an organized workspace. It helps me to prioritize. Or, prioritizing can be a challenge for me, so I have to pay particular attention to that, like making a list in the morning or asking my boss what is her most important items are for the day. I have absolutely no patience for office politics, conspiracies, bullying, micromanagement, or corporate cheerleading. I want to work somewhere friendly and open and fair, where I can treat colleagues as equals and be pretty much left to do my job. In return, I can do it extremely well. Comma takes out a gorgeously calligraphed high quality embossed card, slides it in silence over to the interviewer. It reads, sometimes, the quality of my preparatory work causes people to consider me arrogant. I DK it about this job. My biggest weakness is the inability to think of good answers to bad interview questions. Hyper-focus to absolutely no focus at all also add it is something I put as a weakness and strength. I've had good results with saying I have a hard time resisting playing devil's advocate. I wouldn't know right from wrong if one was helping the poor and the other was banging my sister. I sing in the shower. Sometimes I spend too much time volunteering. Occasionally I'll hit somebody with my car. Could you say my weaknesses are getting to work on time and sober, not stealing from the company, and awkward interview questions as a facetious reply to a dumb question? I think this is related. For my current job's interview, near the end, my now manager opened up the laptop, opened Excel and asked me to do some equations there. Now, I didn't know any Excel at the time, even though the job description required it. I looked a little embarrassed at him and then told him, okay, please bear with me. Then I minimized Excel, opened browser, Google, How to multiply Excel equation. I sneak peek at him while I'm doing this and he's smiling. Then I followed the instructions and completed the task. He was like, "You got the job, buddy. XD." Then he told me it was actually great to see me genuinely express my weakness in an area, and impressed how I dealt with it. He did end up sending to get a quick course on Excel BTW. If you are a shy, quiet person like myself, mention it. I let them know upfront that I am a naturally quiet person, especially around new people, and it sometimes comes off the wrong way. People tend to think I am in a bad mood, or have a rude personality, or just don't like them. Then when they get to know me they do a 180, so I'll let them know from the beginning that I am quiet. But it doesn't mean I'm in a bad mood or don't like them or anything. I just don't talk much until I get to know people. Money. I'll work much harder if you pay me more. My D is so big, my pants burst open sometimes. Anything that doesn't affect your performance in the specific position you are interviewing for while sounding humble and affirming you're working on it. Like saying you're not good at public speaking at a job interview for back office but you intending on doing a course on it on summer, for example. Interviewer. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Me. I'd say my biggest weakness is listening. My biggest weakness is that I care too much. That I work too hard and am too dedicated to my job. S. My D is too big. Also, I'm a very sexy person. Even my family wants to have sex with me. I'm not sure. Let me check Stack Overflow real quick. I'm a big fan of this one. I tend to rely on others to double check my work a bit too much. At first, I hesitate to assume processes or tasks until I am sure I get it right. It is honest, and is a weakness. Trainers get a little annoyed with constantly checking up, but it also shows that you are determined to do a good job, and can be relied on to not make huge mistakes early on. I say that sometimes I'm scared to ask questions when I start a new job because I don't want to look dumb. It's perfect, because then if they do hire me, I have a built-in excuse for asking stupid questions. I interview a lot of people. There is no magic answer here. Just be open and honest. Those that ask it are looking for some self-awareness, and it is important that you be able to respond to that weakness. Ideally, you are looking at this position because it minimizes one of your weaknesses and plays to your strengths. Not liking rejection is great for some positions, and horrible for others. Getting bored by monotonous tasks is good for some jobs, and horrible for others. And for what it's worth, I think it's a bad interview question. I told them I was lazy. Then I went on to explain that if there's a simpler, more efficient way to complete a task, I was going to find it. This segued perfectly into a discussion of my skills in automation, scripting, and other development projects in which I streamlined some process or other. After I was hired, new boss told me my response had stuck with the interviewers after I left. My last job, I told them my weakness was that I do a lot of coke in the bathroom. Everybody laughed and I got the job. And then the guy interviewing me pulled out a big bag of sugar from his pocket and started chopping up limes right there on his desk. We did so much sugar that night it was crazy. Politely putting up with mind-numbingly stupid interview questions. I have no patience for trite, formulaic interview questions. The key on this is you've got to spin it into a positive. Take this example that I give when I interview. My hands are very strong and sometimes when I give neck and shoulder massages to the females in the office they complain that my grip is more than they can handle. However, I've recently stopped doing hand grip exercises and so my grip is weakening a little bit and the complaints about my tight grip have diminished. Something along the lines of I often put too much effort into my job and my life suffers. Interviews. Okay, what's your next biggest weakness? Follow-up questions. How often are you late with tasks? What's your worst quality? I'm never late with tasks but I'm sometimes late to get into office because I have bad timing in the morning. Oh, no problem. Edit. That's proper answer to OP question and quality bulleting and I hope it'll be buried in new comments so only few will see it. X. Say you're over prepared for everything. I usually say, I tend to take on too many tasks at once and don't focus all of my attention fully on one task, but instead multiple tasks have my shared focus. This is something I am working on at my current positions and will continue working on if employed here. This always gets a great response, because they appreciate you wanting to do more with your time as well as that you are working on fixing the weakness. To get my cushy government job, I answered, wanting to learn it all immediately. My weakness is essentially drive and hunger. Play it off like you just need to hit the brakes and enjoy the process. Came across excellent in my interview, according to my co-workers I have now. Something very work specific, but that is really not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Followed up by discussing how you are working to improve said weakness. For example, I'm not as well versed in creating Excel formulas as I would like be. I have been watching tutorials in my spare time to improve this skill. I work too hard. I care too much. And sometimes, I can be too invested in my job. Saw Michael Scott. This is a trick question. They don't care about what your weakness is. They want to know how you deal with it. For example, you can say you have a hard time balancing a lot of things, but you overcome this by setting a list of priorities and following through. Interviewer: what is your biggest weakness? Candidate: my biggest weakness is honesty. Interviewer: I don't think being honest is a weakness. Candidate: I don't give a duck about what you think. I have a weakness for sweets. I usually say my anxiety, which is true. I'm a functional basket case on the outside, and how I work around it and give specific examples. Like I have an endless amount of checklists and notes, because I'm paranoid that I'll forget something important, and cheat sheets to help me remember important information. I get nervous in new places, so before I go somewhere new I look up the place on Google Maps. If it's a business I look to see if they have photos of the inside. Make it something you can't control, such as being a college student and saying I have a lack of professional experience.